Most people think AI takeover means robots replacing every job at once. That is the wrong story. The real shift starts quietly, with entry-level work disappearing first, hiring getting tighter, and companies automating the easiest tasks before anyone notices. The IMF has warned that AI exposure is around 40% globally and much higher in advanced economies. But the detail that matters is this. The earliest pressure lands on entry-level roles, where the tasks are easiest to automate and the ladder into the job market becomes harder to climb. That changes the story for younger workers first. Not because AI is magic, but because entry-level jobs are full of repeated tasks. Scheduling, simple reports, data entry, basic customer replies, and routine analysis. This is why some companies sound optimistic, while workers sound worried. AI can increase productivity for the people who already have skills. But for people trying to get their first break, fewer entry-level tasks means fewer ways in. So the real labor market change is not just job loss. It is job compression. AI can shrink teams, flatten career ladders, and make the first step into a profession much harder than the last step. At the same time, not every worker is hit equally. Some roles become more valuable because AI raises the output of experienced people. That is why the same technology can look like a boost in one department and a threat in another. That split is important because it explains why headlines sound extreme while the real world feels uneven. AI is not landing everywhere the same way, and that difference matters more than the headline version of the story. Now add regulation. Europe's AI Act reaches a major enforcement stage in August 2026, which means transparency, high-risk obligations, and documentation rules become much more serious. That matters because companies do not deploy AI the same way in every region. If rules are stricter in one place, rollout slows. If rules are looser elsewhere, deployment accelerates. So AI is becoming a policy problem as much as a technology problem. This is one of the least discussed parts of the AI revolution, the geography of adoption. Where the rules are clear, deployment changes. Where the rules are unclear, companies move faster. The result is not a single AI future, but many different ones. Then there is the safety side. AI incidents have continued to rise, and the patterns are not just mistakes. They include bias, privacy problems, deepfake harm, fraud, and models behaving in unexpected ways under pressure. That is important because people often imagine AI risk as one dramatic sci-fi moment. In reality, the damage usually arrives in smaller, messier ways. One fake image, one wrong decision, one automated mistake, repeated enough times to matter. Frontier models are also getting more capable, which makes containment harder, not easier. Recent safety discussions suggest that once systems can act more like agents, you cannot treat them like passive tools anymore. That is the part many casual AI videos skip. They talk about prompts and productivity, but not about agency, containment, and how systems behave when they are given tools, memory, or autonomy. So the real question is not whether AI can answer questions. It already can. The question is what happens when it can plan, act, and hide mistakes inside complex systems that humans barely monitor. That is why safety researchers keep focusing on architecture, not just behavior. If the structure is weak, then better prompts are not enough. A smarter system can still fail in a smarter way. There is also a trust problem. When deepfakes, synthetic media, and automated scams become cheaper, the cost of believing the wrong thing falls on everyone else. So the hidden AI story is not only labor, it is also truth itself. Once machines can generate content at scale, society has to spend more time verifying what used to be assumed real. That creates a second-order effect: more verification work, more compliance work, more review work. AI does not simply remove tasks. It can also create new layers of work that were unnecessary before. This is why the best AI discussions are not about hype. They are about who gets leverage, who gets squeezed, and which systems become harder to trust as adoption expands. If you want the shortest possible summary, it is this. AI does not just automate tasks. It changes ladders, incentives, oversight, and the cost of mistakes. That is why this matters beyond the obvious. The biggest effect is often not the first one people talk about. It is the second and third order consequences that quietly reshape work. In the short term, people look at one tool and ask, can it replace me? In the longer term, the smarter question is, what does this tool make easier, cheaper, and more normal? That is the real AI revolution. Not just the model itself, but the new habits it creates inside companies, governments, schools, and media systems. The world does not change because a headline says it will. It changes when thousands of small decisions start to line up. Hire here, automate there, regulate this, ignore that. That is why the countries that prepare early will handle AI better than the ones that wait for a crisis. Timing matters, and policy timing is now part of the competition. Meanwhile, safety research keeps reminding us that capability growth and control do not automatically move together. Powerful systems can still surprise the people building them. That gap is the reason advanced AI systems are being discussed more like infrastructure than software. Once something becomes infrastructure, failure becomes society-wide. So when you hear AI talk that sounds too simple, be careful. The obvious story is usually only the first layer. So when you hear AI talk that sounds too simple, be careful. The obvious story is usually only the first layer. The deeper story is about power, adaptation, and control. Who gets to use AI? Who gets protected from it? And who has to live with the consequences? One reason this matters is that the labor market is not affected evenly. The IMF has repeatedly pointed to about 40% of global jobs being exposed, but the pressure is sharper on entry-level roles. That means the first jobs people use to enter a field may be the first jobs to shrink. So the long-term damage is not just unemployment, it is a weaker pipeline into work. In practical terms, AI is changing how companies think about junior labor. If a machine can handle routine tasks, firms may hire fewer beginners and expect the remaining workers to do more. This is why some economists worry about inequality. Workers with AI skills can benefit, while workers without access to training get squeezed harder than before. The IMF has also noted that the gains do not land equally across countries. Advanced economies tend to feel more exposure, while lower-income countries face a different kind of pressure. That is why the same technology can look like a productivity boom in one place and a labor shock in another. AI is not one global experience. It is many local experiences at once. Now add the policy layer. The EU AI Act is moving toward broader enforcement in August 2026, which means firms have to think more carefully about risk classes, documentation, and compliance. That matters because regulation shapes behavior. If the rules are clearer, companies adjust. If the rules are vague, they move faster and often take bigger risks. So the future of AI is partly a legal story. Not every country will move at the same pace, and that means AI will spread differently depending on what governments allow or require. At the same time, safety researchers keep warning that the frontier is getting more complicated. As models become more agentic, the failure modes become less obvious and more expensive. That is one reason recent safety work keeps focusing on containment, oversight, and architectural controls. The problem is not only what the model says, but what it can do. This is where the hidden risk becomes real. A system does not need to be malicious to cause damage. It only needs to be powerful, poorly contained, and trusted too much. That is why the safety conversation has shifted from simple outputs to systems design. If the architecture is weak, adding more capability can multiply the risk instead of reducing it. And while people argue about whether AI is overhyped, the real-world adoption keeps moving. Companies are using it for content, coding, analysis, support, and increasingly for decision workflows. That adoption matters because every new use case creates a new dependency. Once a workflow is built around AI, turning it off becomes expensive and politically difficult. So the hidden question is not whether AI exists. It does. The question is how dependent society becomes before it truly understands the trade-offs. The smartest companies are already preparing for that world. The smartest workers are learning how to use AI without becoming replaceable by it. That is the practical takeaway. Do not think in slogans. Think in workflows, skills, and leverage. That is where the future is actually being decided. AI is not just a tech story anymore. It is a labor story, a policy story, a safety story, and a power story all at once. And that is why this matters now. The first people to understand the shift will be the best prepared for it. The ones who wait for it to become obvious may already be behind.